Well, welcome to Mind Your Mouth podcast. I am your host, Melissa Mugno. And as I always promise all of you guys, I am going to bring you another authentic and kind-hearted conversation talking about all things from our mind to our mouth. And I'd love to introduce my fabulous guest, who I actually can call my very, very dear friend, Dr. Joanna Dover. I'm sorry, I saw you. I'm like, hold on, I'm reading your name
I
in
go
there.
by all things.
Joanna is not just a doctor who practices airway medicine, but she is truly like a sister to me. I had the honor of working with her office and herself very closely for over a year, and our relationship has grown. And so, as I was putting together all my initial guests, Joanna was right on the top there because I wanted to bring people, and Joanna, all the listeners and anyone who follows knows that I promised them everybody I brought on, I had a relationship with, or I was like curious about a conversation, and I wanted them to hear more about the things we talk about off camera. And most of the people will ask, like, who's the audience? I'm very lucky. I have a really great following from my own mentor. All the students tend to follow and listen, but I do have a really great group of airway dentists, plant medicine friends have been watching lately. I've been getting a lot of support that way, and a lot of up and coming people through my openness of talking a little bit about my healing journey and my mental health. And they always ask, how does your mental health connect to dentistry? And I say, oh, they're one and the same. I said, for me, the teeth, and you actually, oh my gosh, guys, if you guys remember on any of my things when I was having the issue where was losing my teeth, I was actually at Joanna's office where she had to like help me come out of that extreme clenching, hyperextensive situation. And I proceeded to tell everybody that I was purging, I was releasing, and so much of the stuff was showing up in my mouth and how it has always. So we'll get into some of those stories, but why don't we start off a little bit? Why don't you tell everybody, like, how did we meet? How did we get into this? And what brought you even to Airway a little bit before we dive into some of the other stuff?
So my sister is kind of how a little bit of it started. I don't get to see her a lot. She lives in South Florida, and I feel like she just needed to get out of the house, get moving. She hadn't been as peppy as she had been in prior years. And I was like, Bridget, let's go on a retreat, like me and you. Let's go somewhere. I'm like, we're gonna go to Costa Rica. So I Googled number one wellness retreat in Costa Rica. This was March of 2022. I stuck my sister's email in a listserv, and come, I don't know, was it October or November of 2023, I flew in Melissa, who I'd met at a conference in New Orleans, and we're sitting there. And I was like, hey, we're sitting at this restaurant called Taza. She's next.
Wait,
Hey, Melissa. Oh,
before you go there, actually, let's even go back. And I want to just highlight something about how the universe works in really interesting ways. You actually found something, you called me first, and we had a
yes,
phone conversation. And
that is true.
the phone conversation, and for any of you guys know, normally, if I do get like an intro with a doc, I normally go to their office first. I don't normally go and like do an interview process. But she happened to be coming to New Orleans, and I was like, you know what? Let me just come down and I'll meet you at this conference. I wasn't actually even at that conference. I drove down just to meet you. I came down to meet you. And
Or
so
just
I didn't realize like you had already kind of researched that place. That place had already come up.
no, no, I
Oh,
hadn't. That
okay.
is I had no idea what it was. I just looked up number one wellness retreat and stuck my sister on the listserv. I had no idea what it was until I
Wow.
looked at you and I said, oh, I like your bracelets. And you're like, oh, I got one of them for each time I've been to Rhythmia. And then, girl, you start this story and like crying. And I'm like, is this the same place I signed up for? I had to go like look at my phone. I'm like, Bridget. And then 2 weeks later, my dad dies unexpectedly. It might have been a couple weeks after that. I have to go back and look at the dates. Started researching about what that was. Showed my mom some documentaries we all were watching together. And she sent us 10 grand. She's like, I want you and your sister to go. And that was in March, like the month before I turned 40. And
Mhm.
then actually went back to Rhythmia with my mom in
Ah,
December of last year. Yeah.
just people, just so you guys know. So here's what we're talking about a little bit. So as you guys know, right, I do the consulting thing, but when I started my airway journey, it was very connected into dental, always was, right? And I actually ended up at Rhythmia because of a dentist that I was working with. He went and we had this big falling out. And so I went and I actually thought I didn't know what I was going to do in the dental space. I'm literally in the airport coming back, getting ready to fly back. I don't know what my next journey is going to bring. A buddy of mine calls me and is like, "Hey, I think we should work together." I tell him I'm leaving Costa Rica. And he goes, "Where were you?" I said, "Oh, I don't know if I want to tell him because I want to, us coming onto this podcast and we're going to openly talk about dentistry, plant medicine, all this stuff. It takes courage and bravery because it is a little bit still taboo in some worlds to be talking about psychedelics and stuff." But I say to him, "Well, I go, I'm leaving this place, Rhythmia." And he goes, "Hold on." And he's a dentist in Nashville. And he goes, "I knew there was a reason you were on my mind." He takes a picture of his office in his practice. I hadn't been to it yet. And he has a mural of the Maloka, which is this place where you go and you sit and you drink the medicine. I end up working with him for a year and then life changes. And then I asked the universe, I said, "Anybody that I work with or that I'm going to help or be able to support with, can you help me find people that are on a path that are not only just trying to help people, but help themselves, be their best version?" And then here you come in. And I felt from the moment we spoke, I was like, I got to get in the car and go meet this lady. So drive down. And then we end up on this amazing journey. And then you full bodily, like just embrace it now, knowing your sister and all this stuff. So you really never felt like it was so much about you. You thought maybe you were going more for your sister or,
I totally thought I was the chaperone.
okay.
Um, it had not been on my radar before at all. And then she gets all upset 'cause she didn't have an experience at all. And I put on this shirt that was like Jacob in the Technicolor Dreamcoat and like schwa. And all of a sudden I'm playing with energy and want to hold people. And I lay on somebody and which I'm not probably been supposed to do at that point. And like electricity comes through me and she rises off the ground. And it was just, it doesn't matter if I was there for my sister or not, because every time you go in there, we might have shared a room, but you're an individual and you go through the process of what are you leaving and what are you hoping to gain by this experience. And for me, I had a lot of confusion about how to live my life. I'm like the prototypical, like I got raised by a mom who wanted to have a strong daughter who could always make her own money, not need to rely on a man, and could always take care of herself because so many women in her life had ended up in bad spots. And she's like, "Joanne, you're never gonna be beholden to somebody else. You can take care of yourself." And she set up this really strong woman foundation of education and passion. Like, she is a dental hygienist. I love dentistry. I was blessed. I got to apply out of high school. The University of Florida did an amazing job by me that I did a year as a general practice resident in Columbia, South Carolina. Those programs were amazing. Everything is always about achievement, achievement, achievement to this dream of having this practice. And, within 1 year of having my practice, or 11 months, 13 months, I had my first child. And so here you are trying to manage being a mother and working and new profession. And then I kept having kids and I was really struggling with balancing it, but also maternal. Like, I love my children and I love snuggling them and all these things, but how to manage my time, it always felt like my practice was the number one thing on my mind over my children. And I would lay in bed at night and I would be thinking about patients and the office and all the women, a lot of them single women that work for me, and the pressure of wanting to make sure that I can lead as providers so everybody in the trickle down effect, the
And let
patients have the best experience, the employees can put food on their table and everything is good. And I always felt like I would have leftovers for my children and my husband. And I could tell that there was an imbalance. And so
Let's just real quick, sorry, just to give the listeners context. So you run currently at this time, you run not a small, I mean, pretty large practice, not just one, but two of them. So, I mean, from if a traditional dentist is listening to us, I mean, you are definitely, as terms of dentistry, doing all the things you're supposed to do, success, all of those aspects. And, that wasn't 100% filling your cup, right? There was some balancing concerns and issues.
Yeah, it could fill my cup, and I loved it at the expense of my family life, right? And your kids are getting older. My husband saying, "Hey, this is not right. How can you just not leave the office and come home?" But it was at that point, I think I had 30 employees, and there's 5 dentists in some capacity that we all work together, not all full time, but in and out of the office. And it's always just a lot to a lot to handle, but it's something I'm passionate about. And so I love it. And so, every time I take care of a child or a patient, I take it personally. And so it feels almost as important as my family at that moment. And I always just think I'm going to have enough, and there wasn't enough. And also because of that, I was trying to tell my husband, like, I can't stop working unless like we sell everything, because as long as I'm working in dentistry, I can't focus on my family because, I can't balance it. So what I went to Rhythmia asking for was help in all of that kind of balance. And actually it ended up going to where I went through premature ovarian failure at 35. I stopped having my periods and went into full menopause. And I've always been kind of high stress, so it was kind of they tried to tell me, well, I went to a lot of people, right, who are trying to figure it out because if you go through menopause that early, you have a higher chance of early death because without the hormones, you're not getting your estrogen. You need estrogen for brain health. It doesn't feel great to have no hormones, but under 40, I wasn't excited about just going on hormone replacement therapy for what, like the rest of my life. So I was doctor shopping, found a great physician who was trying to talk to me about stress, vagus nerve stuff, gut health, small intestinal, large intestinal. And it's a lot. It's a lot for somebody to try to tell you wake up and then 15 minutes before you eat, do bitters and then eat. And then you have your charcoals and your binders and your keystone species you're trying to redo. And so I got to this point too where I was like, how much money and time am I supposed to be focusing on myself? As little as there was for my children and my husband, there was even less for me of eating and drinking and taking care of myself. That was like the bottom of the totem pole.
Before the early menopause and all that stuff, would you have considered yourself a pretty like holistic, natural kind of person?
Yeah, so what happened is I got pregnant with my boy, and there's a lot of mental health issues in my family. And so I just PubMeded autism. And the latest research that I read at that point was talking about that children with autism spectrum disorder had less heavy metals in their hair, urine, and feces than the other group of children. And so their body was holding on to it and not able to excrete it as well. So, like, I was, started looking, and mercury is one of them. And at this point, I'm just slaying mercury out of people's mouths, as you need to if a tooth needs it that has a silver amalgam mercury filling, the main ingredients actually mercury. And so that weekend happened to be the IAOMT, the International Association of Oral Medicine and Toxicology's annual meeting in this like Isle of Palms, which is like an hour away. And I went there, and I think my baby was just born because I remember I think I was pumping in the back row of the meeting. And somebody's like, "Oh, that's liquid gold." And I was like, "Yeah, I just have this like memory of it." And they have a way that they remove amalgam that is under a rubber dam and try to decrease the aerosols. If you're concerned about it in your system for how much you chew and hot beverage, and if that gets in, if there's no matter what, always an amount in your bloodstream from normal functions on amalgam, imagine how much is created as a plume when you're taking it out. So that started my journey. I'd been a nutrition major in college. I would always had been a label reader. We pre-ordered our composite, which is an Ormisor called Admira Fusion. Like that
Yeah.
is that is the goal of how I wanted to practice,
Right.
was to try and conscientiously use materials. And so with that,
Perfect. That's super interesting because I just did a podcast 2 days ago with Dr. Kevin Boyd, and he is speaking at the ADA in 2 weeks in Chicago on all the power of nutrition and chewing, and that like how helpless we really are in dentistry overall if we don't. So it's really, again, I'm all about the universal signs. You both are really hitting home right now of nutrition, chewing, and you both happen to have majors of nutrition. So did he. So that's a big passion that kind of led you right to go
well, what I
down.
realized is everything that we put in your mouth is a foreign material. I can replace your mercury filling with something else, but nothing in there is as good as your God-given teeth. And I hate, every time you touch a tooth, you're creating some type of effect on that tooth. You can't just replace fillings and pretend like everything's going to always be okay. So I hate looking at the destruction of patients in my first 2 years of practice of what they're presenting with, and it makes me unhappy to cut on teeth, to drill, fill, and bill. So I started looking into, well, how did they end up this way? What if we could have gotten them as children? Everybody by 40 was having like cracks in their second molars. It was just, how can we create good occlusion, no cavities, and balanced occlusions? And then at that point, Healthy Start was the product that I saw and looked into. And I got probably, I don't know, like 16 kids early and thought that I would follow them through. And my oldest child was just easy. Well, there's so much. I mean, this could keep going on forever. So I also breastfed all three of my children painlessly. Everything was fine. My oldest kid has an anterior crossbite all the way through. I'm like, how do you get like this? And one day he's like, I'm like, when you swallow, where does your tongue go? And he goes, down. And I was like, really? And so then my middle child was a thumb sucker forever, and his stuff talk about the whole mind body connection. He has this convergence insufficiency and also has an auditory processing disorder.
Give the listeners a little bit more on what does that mean?
My middle son, you know how you can punish all your children the same way, but they all take it differently? Like my middle son, he could never like remember rhymes. He could never, there were things about him that were different that his little sister would make fun of him even for. And if you were to punish him, it wouldn't be like, "Yeah, I deserve that." It was like he took it internally. You could tell that it was different and the way he learned, and so he was sucking his thumb,
Like the
and
way
I
he's actually absorbing the
the way
experience.
he was absorbing and processing, like, cause and effect of situations and just interpersonal interactions. So, because he ended up having later this hearing thing, like, say there was music on upstairs and I would yell at Weston to do something and he wouldn't listen or he wouldn't hear me, or say I'm talking to you, but somebody else is talking to you also, like things that I thought he was getting, he just wasn't getting. And my aunt came up to me one time because he didn't like to read, and she goes, "Weston, my mom said it. She goes, something's wrong with his eyes." And I was like, "Well, he's fine at the pediatrician." And then my aunt's like, "Oh, did the letters squiggle on the page?" And he said, "Yes." And I'm in the front seat. I'm like, "Weston, how many fingers do I have up?" And he's like, "Two." Like, how do we get to this point that you're 8 years old and the letters are squiggling on the page and you're seeing double from the back of the car and not me? I'd been waiting for 2 years because I'd said something to the school and they're like, "Oh, he's fine." And I ended up getting his eyes checked. He was below the fifth percentile for tracking. And I have this genetic eye thing with my family that's just the eyes don't focus really well. And he was seeing double vision for enough of a distance that reading was really, really hard for him. And so when the binocular optometrist looked at him, she said, I want you to get his hearing tested too. So I went to the audiologist and she put him in a sound booth and he got diagnosed with this auditory processing disorder. The biggest things were if there was white noise in one side and he
Mhm.
tried to do something in the other ear, differentiating between the sounds was very, very hard for him to pick up. So if you're talking to somebody, Melissa, and I'm like, "Hey, Wes, you need to go upstairs and do something," but he didn't stop, change, look at me, like he was not getting what I would be saying, and I wasn't making sure that I stopped a lot of times, and my communication wasn't working for him, and he would end up getting into trouble, but then also not purposefully ever trying to do wrong things, and I would get frustrated with him, which makes I
Relationship.
a really hard relationship. I wasn't talking to him in the way that he could work, and instead I was coming down and having a lot of negative interactions, and he was internalizing, he could see it, and it was really it was
Yeah.
heartbreaking after I realized this to think about how I approached him from a parenting standpoint, because you love your children, you want them to, like, become obedient to the point where they can
Be
listen to
functional
you,
in the world. Yeah, absolutely, like,
Yeah,
it's a tough
but
call because parenting in general, it's like and again, a lot of us, I mean, I have, kids in different spectrums of their lives because I have this age difference, but, so I almost have like two almost only children in a weird way because of the 7-year difference, right? It's almost a reset, but each child absorbs and retains things so much. And I know some of my girlfriends more similar to you, 3 kids under 7. You know what I mean? Boom, 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 boom. And it's like you kind of don't know, who has what, or you're trying to manage all of it. And I think parents really get overwhelmed in this space, right? I mean, it seems.
Yeah. And especially if you have something else that's on your mind over your children, which it shouldn't be, but for me it was. And so he became angry. He was, acting out. He was depressed as a child at 8. You could just see it. And so I switched to an intense love approach and started snuggling him every night and just being like, here, I'm here for you. And it really changed our relationship, which is always still a work in progress for all parents and their children.
But your
But
daughter your daughter's the more typical myofunctional case, correct?
yeah, but hold on, right before I get there, I have to
Oh,
finish
okay.
out and tell you. So the
Good.
audiologist told me until he had tongue to palate resting posture, his hearing wouldn't improve.
No way. So this was from the audiologist.
From the audiologist.
First time you had ever really heard another physician correlate and connect these dots?
Correct.
Wow. Did you ask
And
why?
she actually has a great Myo testimonial too, that's probably that
Yeah.
Kayla has. So that's the myofunctional
So good
therapist
there.
that and
So
so
his audiologist says, "I think you will never be able to get true, clear, ability to hear. He won't be able to hear fully until we are able to get his tongue resting position up to be able to support the maxilla bone or to support the swallowing."
I
What do you think
you
it
know,
was?
it's weird. I don't know. I think it's for vagus nerve feedback. I don't know if it's posterior, portion of the tongue. She was doing primary reflex integration stuff with him, and I don't know where the auditory portion goes with it with palatal pressure, but I was just like, oh my gosh, because he was the one that I had been ignoring his tongue habit, his oral habit of thumb because I could tell that he needed to while we were working through how his brain was processing that he needed his thumb to self-regulate. So for him, I was a blessing when he sucked his thumb, it was up. And so his molars were class 1. He wasn't distalizing his mandible and he's really small for his age. So while I was working through the younger sister with a, bilateral crossbite, anterior open bite, I was just
Mhm.
letting him suck his thumb while I figured out his eyes, his ears, and then I figured I'd get to his tongue later because it takes, work and it just didn't feel like the right time. Funny enough, I
But
laid
that
in
was
bed with him.
you went with your mom gut there. Like you knew that you couldn't just take away that thumb. You were gonna send him off into a spiral there, or if you would have made it, oh my God, the thumb is bad, or you can't do that.
He
That wasn't
needed it to emotionally regulate. And when he was ready, he would be ready. And funny enough, he just came home. He's 10 years old now. He just came home from summer camp and for a week away. And he goes, Mom, I didn't suck my thumb at all. And it was Sunday night. And he's like, You don't care about me because you have not released my tongue yet.
oh.
So I was like, "Okay, baby, tomorrow you're going to work with me." But that's what I've been waiting for, right? Like before he wasn't ready. You have to be able to push through and he's doing everything, all the exercises on his own. He's using his Replenish. He's showing me all of his stuff. And I feel so blessed that it's in this place for him begging for it, instead of me pushing it on it. And that's part of this journey that we're in, right? Like
Mhm.
meeting families where they are and trying to figure out the best time chronologically, biologically, emotionally, psychologically, all the ways to work through what we
Which
want to do. So,
I mean, to hear that from a parent side is so amazing because I think a lot of times the parents really struggle, and I think that's such a testament of one thing I'll tell everybody working with Joanna and with the team, I would come in and be like, well, we'll just do it like this. And she'd be like, well, no, 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 you got to do this. We got to, because you care so much about the patient and the parents and how they feel. And you are one of the I mean, I really say, I think your natural God-given talent is that you do naturally go put yourself in the other person's shoe. Not many people have that empathy that you show. Like it's almost it can almost be an obstacle. You'll be like, well, hold on. How did the mom feel there? And I'm like, well, we can't fix it for everybody, but it's really a gift of yours that you have that ability to kind of say, well, hold on, let me think about this for how my patient will feel or how the experience, but that's a lot of energy to wear.
Well, I tried to do myo virtually with Leighton, with an incredible myofunctional therapist who knows more than I will ever know in my entire life, and it was hard for me to do, and I realized that it's through going through the trenches, but it's funny being, this way, I have a really hard time leading because everybody who says something like, "Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you too." So it's sometimes really, really hard. Before I had this meeting with you, actually this morning I got up at 3 o'clock and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go back to bed," and it was like 3:40. I'm like, "I'm not gonna fall asleep." I think it was because up until this morning, me finally actually spending some intentional time, and it's been a while since I felt centered. When I went and did plant medicine, which is I did ayahuasca, which is an MAOI inhibitor and DMT for a long amount of time. It's a psychedelic that allows you to stay in a psychedelic state for a long period of time for those who don't
Please,
know
yeah.
it. And so I first saw my life. It was saw all of these representations of my life, and I just could see how beautiful it was. And then, I mean, there's a couple of things that happened, and it was beautiful, and I knew it to represent my life. And then all of a sudden, these big bubble letters come up, and they say dissatisfied, and it breaks, and my beautiful sea glass tub that is aqua breaks apart, and it's this dirty bathtub, and the sea glass is inside. But
Well, let's for the listeners, let's give them a little background on plant medicine. Okay, so I appreciate you giving the science behind it. So just for everyone to hear, so you guys, anyone that follows me and listens, I started drinking ayahuasca. So this place that we're talking about, the original Rhythmia in Costa Rica, is a really beautiful wellness center. They very much cater to the Westerner. It's very safe, and there's medical staff, and there's a psychologist and people on staff, and there's beautiful classes and farm to fresh food and a lot of great things. And that was the first place that I went about 4 years ago, and I've been drinking. And for me, I went and was called to drink ayahuasca because I had a lot of childhood traumas. And those childhood traumas were absolutely affecting and deregulating my central nervous system. I was living in one place, I was living on antidepressants and all, and just trying to self-regulate any way I could. So I'm her son and her daughter. No longer I couldn't suck my thumb and bite my nails. I'm, drinking wine at night and taking Adderall and antidepressants during the day. And what plant medicine helped me do was start to find self love and start healing, which then embarked me to start really shedding my physical. And you guys can even see the change of me physically in 4 years. And I've kept going. And then lately I've been having this beautiful thing. So Joanna went down with her sister, and that's what she's talking about. But you just gave a little bit of the science of plant medicine, because I know there's going to be people out there that say, "Oh, Melissa and Joanna are going to do psychedelics. They're running down and doing drugs." What do you say to people that say that?
well, so, drugs are addictive. Psychedelics don't have, as far
Yeah,
as I know,
nobody's
any
go I
addictive
promise you this.
property.
No, me and Joanna aren't bringing a vat of ayahuasca to a Christmas party. Well, maybe we are.
And I'll say, 95% of people I'd heard still said that that week of Rhythmia was like the most impactful week of their life after a year. I mean, I don't drink alcohol anymore.
Same.
It changed everybody they know. It changed their life from a positive standpoint. And when you talk about drugs, usually I think of something as negative, an addictive thing where that now controls your life. I only see positive in the people that I know who have done it, and in which case
So
I
here's one of my thoughts, and I'd love your opinion on it. So I look at OMDs, oral myofunctional disorders in kiddos, right? I look at their tongue posture, their behavior, sleep, and then I think of those kids that are not treated. So I think what's so great about your practice is literally, if you guys pull up to Joanna's practice, one side is her adult practice and one side is her pedo practice. So it's like literally the perfect combination. And I think in my mind, if you can't fix the myofunctional issues, which are behavior, ADD, ADHD, well, then they turn into adults that are living on antidepressants, Adderall, using alcohol, not alcohol like drunks that can't function. I'm talking about functioning alcoholics. And alcoholics is
or
maybe
it's food or it's something
whatever.
else. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever it
Well,
is.
that's a crazy thing. I didn't even think I had I mean, drinking, I just knew when I drank,
Or
I
they're
became
clenching and grinding
amazing.
all
And
over the place. It's the
well,
same thing.
the crazy thing is being a child, and when I present, I'll say, here I was as a child. I presented all of these signs, was late to school, tired, my short-term memory's an issue, all of these big aspects that were affecting me. And they kept telling me, it's because I was lazy or I was tired or whatever. I didn't remember what I read, turned into me coping as an adult. And me coping was, if you can't take the amount of Adderall I was taking and the antidepressants, you're so overstimulated all day. I needed 2 glasses of wine just to come down a little bit so that I could even possibly embark on what sleep was. And then my clenching, my grinding, my weight flow, all of these things. So this is where I was telling Joanna when we first started, I had done a webinar or whatever, and some lady's like, well, I was here just to learn about myo. And I made a joke. I said, girl, I am myo. Like, what are you talking? I am myofunctional. I am an airway patient, right? And I'm complex. I have many layers. And I think not talking about mental health or talking about how to rewire this neurological brain of ours is really a big missing piece to be able to treat the entire body. And I'm just curious from a dental standpoint, especially somebody who sat and drank with medicine, if you look at me as a patient, vice versa, how much does that correlate and connect?
Well, it all does. I mean, all of it. So in dentistry, right, we look at dental disease and it's either caries, right? So
Mhm.
if your open mouth posture makes you get caries, then that's an issue. If you're clenching and grinding, or you have a tongue thrust, or your resting tongue is down, that makes you lose canine guidance. You get wear on your second molars. I mean, all of it together. But let's talk about the emotional component first, because the biggest thing that this has changed for me is, oh my gosh, I'm such an overshare. My husband is gonna gonna watch this and go, oh my gosh, Joanna, but that's okay. So my biggest thing is when I came back from doing ayahuasca, and first of all, I've never done anything in high school, anything in college that was like anything like this. I don't like
I think
CBD. I don't like
that's good for them.
marijuana.
It's not like you were like this kind of like I mean, you were a very typical dental student, right? Like very good, follow the
Other
rules.
than alcohol, it wasn't really rolling. So
Okay.
I told Michael that I wanted to hold people for psilocybin journeys. And he's like, "What? I don't know if we're growing together. I don't know what happened to you." And the reason why is because I saw how much healing happened, and I felt this power in my hands. And the last night I made this wall of healing with my hands for everybody. So I put on this shirt, and when you do ayahuasca at Rhythmia, you have sessions and it says like, merge me back with my soul, heal my heart. There's something before
And
that.
yeah,
But so
well,
they asked,
at all
huh?
costs. Yeah, merge me back to
Yeah,
my
merge me
soul at all
back with my
costs.
soul at all costs, heal my heart.
Heal
I
my
mean,
heart.
there's 3.
The last one is oh, it will come to me in a second.
But it was
Oh,
heal my heart was the 3rd one. Anyway, so they're like, well, who's merged with their soul? And all these people are like raising their hands. And I'm like, well, I found this shirt and it had all these like patches, and then it went like ching, and they're like, "Oh, you put on the cloak of a healer." And I was the only one who had that experience, and then I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm a healer." But anyways, going back, I felt like I was supposed to hold people all the time. And so I'm sitting there, I got patients in the chair, and you read over somebody's medical history. In dentistry, we have people in this super awkward, vulnerable position. We sit there, we read their laundry list, and they're already have so much anxiety because you're going to be like this, yeah, and like this. And I would usually like stop, especially like if you can tell somebody's is on a lot of meds, and just say like, "How are you?" And it just had people like breaking down all the time. The people who work with me are probably like, "What is going on?" Because I would just lay on the chair on top of these people, mostly women, and just give them a hug. And we sit there like crying. And one of the times when I did ayahuasca, I woke up the next morning, and in my head was this truth, and it said, tongue ties are generational trauma. And I
mm,
was like, what? And so then there was a study of Rwandan women who all went through genocides. You can have methylation of DNA over generations. And when you're going in there and you're looking at a tongue tie, everybody presents differently. You got your tongue is attached with mucosa like skin, but inside there is fascia.
Mhm.
And when you go in, like with our laser, we go in and then some people, it's just the mucosa in the front and they're like, yay. And they go off and they're happy, they can function and they're great. But on some people, it's a huge webbing of fascia. And I realized I didn't know anything about fascia, which has been the next journey. It's funny because this morning I was looking up articles on fascia. And one of the things, this PubMed article I posted on Facebook was fascia as a regulatory system in health and disease. And your fascia is on top of everything and talking about the innervation of fascia and that it's got what's like 90 times more it's like a sensory organ and it has so many more sensory receptors than your skin and it's the answer is this whole thing burgeons you the combination of wanting to help people grow and develop and be their best self and the
Well
combination of plant medicine and all of it I think is emotional
so
and
I appreciate you bringing up the emotion, and I just wanna bring it back to keep those on. So, very interesting. So when we talk myofunctional therapy, I actually have a disclosure in my adult therapy that says that you can't cancel therapy for 48 hours after a session. You have to have a conversation because what we started to notice was that people would get very uncomfortable or they would get annoyed with the therapist or they would feel like they felt like it was childlike or especially with adults. And what I realized from doing plant medicine and healing was that we were triggering or bringing up very childlike feelings in these adults. And the natural thing that was happening was they wanted to be resistant to it, right? They'd say, oh, that therapist was talking to me like I'm a child. And I literally just had a gentleman a couple months ago, so I'm the director, so they all have to, like, talk to me first before I'll, like, cancel. And I said to them, I go, "I just have a question for you." I go, "Was she talking to you like a child, or did it make you feel childlike?" And he stopped, and I said, "Well, what exactly did she say?" And he said, "Well, she was talking about my chewing and telling me I had to do it differently." And I said, "Well, when was the first time you heard that?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, yeah, like my dad." And I was like, "So she was really bringing up something that you had really embedded inside that you probably were chewing like that at the dinner table and that you've modified for 40 years based off of just wanting your father to stop saying that at the dinner table." Joanna, he stopped and he goes, "Are you a therapist?" And I go, "Well, I'm a myofunctional therapist." I go, "So I'm a very different type of therapist." I said, "No," I go, "I'm a human that's been on a journey." And I said, "I know how these tissues and our oral mouth is so impacted." He broke down and he said, "I'm so sorry that I blamed her." I said, "No, no, no." I said, "You didn't blame her." I said, "You just didn't have the ability to communicate what was happening. And I really want to respect that you thought your dentist told you you had a tongue tie. You said your dentist told you then you had to go get a couple exercises before he'd release it. And then now you're in this, and even though it was said there, you weren't able to absorb that we were about to unravel and start to bring up things you've been suppressing. And now it's all coming up." And he goes, "Am I ready to do this tongue tie release?" I said, "Not yet." And he said, "Oh my gosh, there's more work to be done." And I said, "Yes." And I couldn't have like planned it any better. Do you know that dentist calls back, Joanna, and is like, this guy is gonna wants to now spend 20 grand in doing a full vertical restorative because he feels as though his bite is actually contributing to his child issue, like from childhood issues. And he goes, "I don't know what she did." I said, "You're welcome." And he goes, it's really powerful. He wants to do all kinds of stuff." And I said, "See," and so we started talking, but he's like, "I don't even know." He's like, "Is that in our scope?" And I made a joke to him and I said, "Well, I live in this other scope over here. I live in my own land." And he goes, "Melissa," he goes, "I appreciate what you did." He goes, "But damn, that makes me so uncomfortable in my dental office." And I was like, "I get it. It's such uncharted territory." And when you have that vision, I know that everything in my mouth is childhood. So I just wanted to share that because I think it's really valid to what you're talking about.
I think as people start to, because now myofunctional therapy and airway is like hitting on the ADA, AAPD, you have Ferris 6, that's part of their boards now, like, trying to figure out how to implement that, especially, like, if it was in a busy pediatric practice or the awkward questions for adults. This is not regular charted territory. the hard thing for me right now, one of the hard things is creating the space, the time, and in a regular visit, how to even kind of break upon these kind of things. And
I actually think this is a really great topic, and I appreciate you being so open. I'd love to share, some of the troubles, the struggles, right? So you went all in, we worked really hard to try to implement it on both sides of your practice. And we started with screenings. And for the most part, guys, I'm going to share with like Joanna has a practice where I've been in a lot of practices throughout the country. And I've seen some, owner, principal dentists be able to tell the staff, but Joanna gave full blunt. She said, go in, train my team, tell everybody what you want them to do. But to integrate airway into a success and be able to still pay your bills, listen, you bring up your husband, and I always feel like I hope I didn't fail Michael. Because I'm like, Michael must be like, you hire that girl, Melissa, and I don't know, some shit changed. I'm like, I took his wife on this little journey, but I hope he is a lovely, lovely, lovely man. And I think it's great. But he was right. We would have great conversation. He'd say, Melissa, we still got to make money, right? The business it has to grind. We have a lot of mouths to feed. And there is times that more money was going out than coming in for the airway stuff. And a lot of dentists will come to me and go, this won't make money. And one thing I say from the consulting side is I go, and I try better with every practice to say now, listen, this is a long-term haul. Like you're getting into a 5-year plan here. And we hope on the back end, you're going to see a change because you've actually had to like change the way you look at all dentistry, right? In a lot of
I
ways.
mean, I do, and you're a huge blessing because what you do, resting to me, resting tongue posture and all of the things that are myo. I became a myofunctional therapist too. I went through this AOMT. The Kayla
Yep.
went through my
Yeah.
mentor with
Yep.
Melissa and stuff. But it is the most important thing, root cause, if we're going to be looking to not drill, fill, and bill, but actually be doctors and use our brain into root cause analysis. To me, it's the foundation of so many things. In the last research article I read, they said about 50% of people have some type of disorder in the myofunctional system. So trying to go in there, my staff for a while was like, you need the myo, you got to figure out how to make this work in your hygiene check experience, right? Because
Mhm.
if it's something you got to practice in and you hadn't been looking at that, and now you are on every patient who doesn't necessarily have the time to, especially if there's an emotional component, that's not like the time in a hygiene check to get into that. It
Yeah, of
becomes,
course.
it's how we refer, how we do things. It's a journey that we're all in. But I met Melissa. Well, so my daughter started trying to do myofunctional therapy and we were kind of failing with it. And Melissa said that she could do for me a program in a way that was concise but effective in its amount of time that she had, and for a price per patient that I could look at anybody in the face and tell you this is worth your time and money. So Melissa, you are a blessing to me because you're the only person that I know in the country who's creating implementable systems that people who want to get into it in their office. It's hard. All change is
Yeah.
different and hard, but that doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do. And you singularly are the only person I know of that is doing it in the way you are. So I feel super blessed that you keep
Well,
put, so for me it's not been fast. It's taken
I appreciate
time
it.
to.
Yeah, that's it. It's not fast. Everybody wants it done yesterday. And I said this and I say it all the time. I actually really love the business of like I love dentistry. I really do. Like I geek out on it. Like I love dentists. I mean, honest, I'm realizing most of my real friends aren't like dentists. I love it. I love the business of it. And I think it's because I think the mouth is so intimate. And I feel like there's
Yes.
such a connection there. And I feel like the people in dentistry, it feels, I've been on this journey of like, what is home? Like, what is home, right? What does feel like? And where I feel most home is in a dental office. Like I could almost cry, right? Like it feels so familiar to me. I know, like I just know every aspect of it, right? Like I
Well,
just
that's convenient since this is your profession, it's
and
better than it's at a ballet
yeah,
studio. I
it does.
mean,
It feels and it's because I spent so much time as in a dental office as a child. I really had a great dentist, even though he didn't, and it saved me in a lot of ways. But one of the things is I really want dentists to be successful in implementing airway because I think if we don't do that, we don't have a chance of changing the status quo. We don't have a chance of having these conversations with parents and getting people to plant seeds. So if it wasn't for doctors like you or Dr. Maribel Santos down in Florida, even Holly up in Virginia, like some real pioneer women, because they have this empathetic listen. I was on with a guy yesterday. I'm not, yeah, last week, and his three of his hygienists bombarded him. And I'm just curious what you're walked into his office and they said, we all want to be myofunctional therapists. And he said he was angry. He felt like they kind of put him in a position, and he's like, I'm doing sleep dentistry, but I'm not making any money out of it. And I got to focus on this. And I was trying to help him see that you could implement, but he like had a wall up, right?
That's hard because so many people, it's so hard in the hygiene scope right now. There's such a need for hygienists
uh-huh.
that my biggest dream would be that all three of mine would be, or four, because with Kayla would be so into it that that they see it enough and they see the effect when they're treating patients as hygienists that they would want to do that. But then I'd be like, okay, now who's handling perio for my patients?
Yeah.
So
Right.
that
I believe, and actually, guys, I asked Joanna, Joanna and I are taking a little trip at the end of the month, but as you guys know, I had these implants and I want to really bark on my next journey as I want to do my own restorative and get into my expansion. I believe there is a lot of financial services to be attached to somebody who has myo. Like, and I'm hoping Joanna, I asked her if she would take on my case, and we want to document it because I want docs to see, like, if you look at Zagi did Marpy, and then he did a full restorative case. I mean, there's a lot of billable services right there that are connected to the airway journey. And I don't think a lot of providers are able to see that aspect as much. They're kind of a little bit limited of going like, well, if it's not therapy, but the goal is the therapy should open up all the services, like that gentleman that now that wants to do a full restorative because he wants to open the vertical of his bite, or he wants to do a mandibular advancement appliance. He wants to do tap. He wants to do these different things. I
the
just
answer is those were always the ideal restorative solutions for patients, but until they actually understood and could tell what was going on with them, I think that the myo allows them to understand, wow, I never realized that this is where how I was supposed to function. I didn't realize the way that these were all connected. And I think then they take ownership more instead of you just telling somebody, hey, you should put, instead of getting a new car, you should really put that in your mouth for long-term, health and good breathing,
yeah,
right? So,
because the one thing Kevin talked about yesterday that Joanna, I think is a really major missing piece on the general side is the correlation to Alzheimer's and short-term memory loss and sleep disordered breathing. And as somebody who has been struggling with what from childhood trauma up to other things, my biggest issue, I struggle with severe short-term memory issues. And I was talking to him about that, and he said, you show me somebody who has been sleeping, mouth breathing, 30s, in their 30s, their 40s. I promise you, they are on a trajectory of major health issues that are going to cost them a ton of money in their 60s, their 70s. And when they don't have the ability to go make more money, like, you know what I mean? They're coming on that end of retirement and things like that. He goes, so he really was saying his specialty is the kiddos, but 30 to 50 is a major age. They have the resources, they have the ability to own their health a little bit. And if you can help educate, I just think there's a really big opportunity there from the general side that,
there really is.
and
I mean,
how many
we
women,
haven't tapped that all the way
like,
really yet, but
but I think
it
there's,
doesn't matter now. To me, Michael says, "Well, what if we never make money or something like talking about my own?" I said, I mean, it does not matter. The way you change lives is and you're going to be able to be sustainable with it. Melissa will help you with that or however you guys do it.
well, and
I
listen,
mean,
sustainable is, you got to look at it like sometimes like marketing money or whatever. Sometimes you got to change your perspective of the way it looks. But again, and it's not perfect. It really does matter. And so the business of whether we want to call this sleep dentistry. Actually, somebody said to me the other day, they don't like the name of sleep dentistry. They're like, I think it's too much of a buzzword, like it's too buzzy, or you know what I mean, tap worthy. But this is about healing people. And I think from dentists, you know, I remember having an argument with someone saying that dentists aren't doctors. And I said, but they are absolutely doctors. He goes, well, they're not like looking at the whole body. And I argued, I go, no, 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 they do. But I will say now, most dentists don't. Most dentists do just only look at the teeth or just in that little area. And I don't think it's their fault. I'm assuming it's the way you guys are taught within your scope, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And I think that's why some people are more scared to talk about these, how your hips are affected, your feet, your shoulders, your asymmetrical issues, your ears, all of these different aspects. And I feel like there's a real big opportunity for dentists to kind of claim that back. And what are your thoughts on just the whole body and the teeth?
I think I mean, your fascia is around all parts of your body. I mean, you have like everything is fascia. And if that's what's going to your tongue and resting tongue postures, root cause of growth and development and all these things, it's all connected. I mean, there's a lot with gut health and with caries and acid reflux. We're all body stuff. I mean, some people more or less, but when's the last time you went to your cardiologist and they also talked about your whole body?
Well,
I mean, we
right.
are
No, no,
all
nowadays
specialists, I think, kind of go in there more than ideal, right? Ideally, we would all be whole health, but that's the difference, right, between Eastern and Western medicine and organ specific versus whole body. And I think that with the research coming out, everybody's getting more whole body ideally, but the medical model doesn't really support that either, right? It's hard to figure out. So
yeah.
my big thing right now is say fascia has an emotional component, right? And if I'm doing tongue tie release, say somebody it's fascia underneath there too. And I'm just telling them to overstretch it, to stretch it, to work through their healing phase, to strengthen, and what was the root cause of that fascia being tight in the first place? How much of that is it's interesting how many people have emotional responses to a tongue tie release. So, which happens a lot, but there is like an emotional component trying to figure that how to do that in your dental office and
Mhm.
how to incorporate that and where there's time and where you're like, hey, do I give you to somebody for anxiety or not? Or even in the correlation of ENTs and other providers, it's all really the communication for people implementing airway focused dentistry is a lot of stuff.
It's a complex, ecosystem, and it requires really high level, and it's uncharted territory. And I don't know if you've listened to the podcast. I really recommend any listeners to Dr. Mike DeLuke. It's the ortho doc, and he's amazing, right? I think he actually did some stuff he's in South Florida now, I think. But what he's talking about is, listen, he's practiced traditional ortho for a really long time. And he said, listen, the status quo of big pharma, you're talking about the food industry, medical industry, it all needs to be questioned, right? It's not one or the other because we're struggling as a species. Like,
It's how we live our lives. It's
yeah.
our the time that we impose on us. This hate to go to this like you work to pay your bills to come home. This cycle of life that we're in, that is all of it. How we live our life all needs to be called into question.
And I
I
think
mean,
one thing, whether you're introducing myofunctional therapy or just, my mission is just to make every dentist at least a great screener. And I've come to a place that's like, I don't care whether or not you offer any of the services, but at least screen for it, right? Like at least let your hygienists and let everybody screen. And that's actually going to be my big project of like, I think every dental office should be able to at least train their team on screening, then refer. Like Joanna's has a really great practice now that has things you can be referring and at least addressing it so that you're having conversations with people and seeing them as humans. I think people want that. I think people want to know why. It doesn't mean that they don't have to do all of it, but they need education. And if you even want to talk about sales is all about making somebody feel something, right? Connecting to people, making you feel like, oh, wow, that might make my life better, or, oh, that could help me in a way. But the way to do that is education. And the way to educate is by screening and delivering some education. And that kind of takes me into some new projects you've been doing. You went off on a little bit of a rogue situation, like you had nothing else going on, and you start writing a book.
well, because like therapy wasn't successful for us because I didn't have organization in my time in my life, and my child didn't value it. So right now what we were realizing is I had a patient who came in like 5 sessions in for her hygiene check, and the mom said to me, "Can you please explain again to Joanna why we're doing this?" And the patient's name was
Yeah.
Joanna. And I said, "How did we get here? Like, how are we 5 sessions in and we've had all of this communication and the child's is still fighting the parent to do the exercises and I need to be the one to explain it." And so what we're working through is a like a contract that before you get started, this is about your relationship. And some of the people who I have this physical therapist who does focuses only on fascia right now, and we were talking about, and when I did plant medicine too, what I realized was it's the emotional relationship. A lot of it is a relationship between mother and child and goes to supporting women and all these deeper things. And it could be either parent, but now we have a contract that before we start therapy that the parent and child have spent an hour's worth of time sitting and reading an educational book that says why we're going on this journey together, and they both sign it and say we are ready. We understand that this is a commitment, we understand why we are doing this, and both of us want to move forward because myofunctional therapy is practicing something you're doing all the time. It's not just even the 5 minutes in the morning and the 5 minutes at night. And you don't want to be yelling at your kids. You're trying to get 3 kids out of the house in the morning to school is hard enough as it is. For me, screaming at a kid, "Did you do your tongue exercises?" And not even being there and creating the time to watch it. That's not the setup for success. So what we are, as you try in anything, you get to figure out in your style, in your practice, what works well. And what we're realizing going through this is that the experience is much more successful when everybody understands the value of what they're doing and they are ready to move forward. But if one person wants it way more than the other, and if you want it way more than the parents and the patients, that's when you get suboptimal results, which then
Mhm.
create frustration all the way down the food chain. So
So tell us a little bit about, so we jumped around a little bit there, but we talked a little bit about your daughter. So your daughter is a little bit more of what we would consider a typical myo patient. And we're
you
gonna
know,
put everything in the show notes, Joanna. We'll make sure that everybody gets, if you're open to it. I know the book's
oh
not.
yeah, I was like, I got a picture of my daughter
Yeah.
probably around here
And
somewhere,
so
but
she would be, when I say typical, elongated, a little bit elongated mouth breather, dark venous pooling in the eyes. There are plenty of photos you've sent me throughout the year of just when she was little, of her mouth. And ultimately, you started to, not, Joanna also is up and does all the things up at night, and she'd send pictures. And then all of a sudden, this book started to kind of be driven by your child, by your daughter. I mean, even the images and the illustration are all from her, correct?
that's correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. So tell
Problem
us
is,
about it.
my audience, everybody who reads it is like, "Is this for the child or for the parents?" And I'm like, It's for both of them." And I was talking to Joy Moeller, who's wonderful, the other day, and I made her read over it. And she's like, "You have 2 books here." And I was like, "I'm trying to make them into one." And so I'm not a strong writer, and as I keep trying to simplify and then make it more complex, I still feel like it'll never be done and I have more edits, but at least a lot of the pictures now, I still think it's helpful. I probably there's 2 of them,
Well, if
but
you're open,
it's been
maybe
helpful.
what we can do is anybody in the show notes, maybe we can link some of it. We can ask for some feedback if you want any support from any of the therapists.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can ask
absolutely.
from anybody who's interested. We talk of it, but definitely books are, and you know what? Sometimes writing a book from a spiritual side is you're writing it for yourself, not for anybody else, right? Like just the fact that you want to do something to connect. I mean, you talked a little bit about the feminine relationship and the relationship between mother and child and being able to communicate with your children. I mean, that's the thread I've seen right from the beginning is trying to communicate with your son on a better level and meeting people where they're at, because the power of getting people to feel the why or the when and bringing it together in words and imagery is really important to create self-motivation, right? We're all busy, but to make somebody coachable or to coach them, you got to get them to put something into it.
I definitely think the reason why my 10-year-old asked for his frenectomy is because I made him read so many versions of the Myo book.
Okay.
But the goal was like at night you read this to your child, as a your good night story, and it's why you're doing it during this phase, and it just recreates, I love you, I care about you. This is why this is important for you, and we're going on this journey together.
So the concept
And
of the story is more about letting them know that I'm not doing this to you, I'm doing this for you.
yes.
And that is a really powerful line, like that concept, because right now, JJ, my little guy, I mean, he's been in everything. Tongue tie, we've expanded the ALF. And the other night, he got a lot of food down in the ALF, in the lower ALF, and I popped the wire out and he's crying, and we got the gums bleeding. And he looks at me angry, right? He's all fire, those November babies. Why are you doing this to me? I go, I'm not doing this to you. I go, I'm doing this for you. He goes, I don't know why. He goes, I get the metal out of my mouth, but I want my son to breathe. I want him to do those things. But, from parent, kids don't want to listen to you always, so being able to reiterate that, I think that there's a lot of power in that I like a lot of parents feel sad. I mean, that's one of the big issues with tongue tie stretches. Parents will come in and say, I can't do this to my child. And we have to convince them and tell them you're not doing it to them, you're doing it for them.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's not it. And you got to get people to believe in what you're doing so that they can recognize that this is all for them, right? And that goes into self-love, self-care, even, as an adult, everything I'm doing for myself is for me, not to me, or because I did something wrong, or something like that. And that's a overall, even to come full circle, even the mental health. And when you started, right, you opened a practice, you did these things, and you were still feeling like, okay, well, my main focus was having a successful practice and doing the things you were supposed to do, but do I have enough time for this? And I think a lot of business owners, women, people that are, want to be successful and be able to create energy. That's all money is energy, right? Create energy to be able to help others and do things. There's a lot of pressure, societal pressure, and just function overall. And I think it's sad when you feel like you look around your house and you have all the things you're supposed to have. I have a car, I have a home, I go on vacation, and you don't feel 100% fulfilled, or, stuff like that. That can be jarring for people. And I think a lot of times it's a struggled place for people to share that. And I think a lot of business, especially dentists, don't always want to admit that maybe they're not as fulfilled as they need. Would you say that since you've embarked on the plant medicine journey, implementing Myo and having Kayla, one of her great hygienists, become a myofunctional therapist, kind of irritating everybody in the office about airway, do you feel like you're doing more for your patients than you were before?
I feel like this is why I am on this earth at this moment, right? So I felt like until I did Myo that I wasn't really helping my patients in the way I needed to. And so it is, if the house burns down because I can't make it work the way I'm doing it, I pray that I can go through this journey with humility, but also with guidance from God and the universe to have great outcomes. And if I do it as ethically and try to make it as affordable so that people can accept care and do our best job by it, if this does not work in this framework, then it's not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Which is pretty amazing to hear that, no matter where you're at, that this is the right path, and it's the right way to help people and treat people. So, looking back on the last 2 years of your life where when you've started a lot of new things and implemented a lot of new things, how are you, you feel, just talking to you, you feel like you're very clear on your path and your mission. What do you think's in the future? What would be your manifestation, your big dream for the
It's
practice?
so it's so hard because there's so much in life, right? Like there's always more to do for your kids, or there's more to do in it when products like we're finally implementing ozone, but I hadn't been doing MARPy. There's so many things as you learn more and more, you want to learn more and more and do things better. I've got like 8 different type of expanders that we do now. And I saw Audrey Yoon at the Southeastern Southwestern joint meeting in Atlanta in November. And I came up to her, I was like, you just need to accept me into your residency program right now because I'm going to move to LA. It's hard because I get so excited about all these different things and I don't really know what my path is. I do think that what plant medicine allows you to do is for some people, especially people and I've always been a really happy person, and I'm not a person who's actually had a lot of therapy experiences before from psychiatrists or psychologists or counseling. But I feel like what plant medicine allows you to do is to get to those emotions that are right under the surface and to work through things that you haven't been able to do on your own. I don't know how it all comes together for me. I don't know.
I actually
I kn
let's sit there for a second because I really appreciate you saying that because I think of, you know, where I live. I mean, I was very broken. I was in a really, really bad space. So people say, oh, okay, Melissa was okay. I get why she needed to do it. She was really on the struggle bus with mental health. Okay, so there I'm one level of the extreme. But I love that you're saying, like, listen, that wasn't me. I was not broken.
Playing chaperone. I think everybody has their things. I was so into work that I got pregnant with a 4th child, and I felt angry because I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't wanna tell everybody I'm this age and I'm pregnant, and I don't want everybody to, like, not shut down nitrous." And that was the biggest thing that I ended up I didn't have a heartbeat when I went in. So it's weird. I say, "Oh, I'm doing fine," but maybe I felt fine in the outside because I hadn't been diagnosed as clinically depressed or something else. But I was so into work, and work was just enough on my mind that as a mother, what your baseline core doesn't matter where you are from in the world and historically, right? As a woman, you get pregnant, your maternal instinct is always supposed to be to protect your young.
Mhm.
And laying in bed at night, I was more stressed about having to I felt I'm such an empathetic person or whatever, maybe, but I was like, oh my gosh, these people rearranged their schedule to be able to take their child to our office to get their dental work done. And now I can't do nitrous. And I was putting other people's children and work situations and politics over the importance of me protecting my own infant in utero. And I didn't feel connected to my baby. And then the baby ended up not having a heartbeat. And then I just kept rolling, like I'm mourning the baby. And then I went on. But during the experience of having to go back and reflect and doing this experience at Rhythmia, what I realized is the reason why I always wanted to hold patience and I was like going through this experience is that I felt this extreme guilt over not like loving and protecting my child. And so that was I think we all got our own things, but yes, I'd say, hey, going around, you wouldn't have
But you
plant
thought
medicine changed my life, and I thought I was chaperoning my sister.
Mhm.
I was honest when I went there, I was like, "I'm struggling with work-life balance, I'm struggling with some other things," like I think we all are, but I was never somebody who'd ever been on antidepressants, on no meds or anything like that, and, I mean, what I think about everything is totally changed and in an incredible way where when that happens to you, you want to bring it to everybody. You don't care what somebody if somebody looks at you with 6 eyes. It's like I read this article in the Wall Street Journal about Christians, whatever they say, whether you believe that Jesus Christ was the Messiah or not, that people had an experience when they saw Jesus come back that they were willing to just it didn't matter what the consequences were. They were going to go talk about it. It doesn't matter if they were going to die, didn't matter whatever. I feel like that was the same kind of experience I had where, you know, yeah, I went and I took psychedelics and that could sound odd, whatever, and maybe not your jam. It wasn't initially something I was looking for and it changed everything about my life.
It's true. Like, I am recognizing also it's about the ability of getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and, like, you just can't not say the things that you're feeling, and one of the things I'm going through as I can't not talk about it, right? Like, I could try to dance around it, and I was talking this month about July for me. a thing that I'm still working through is this, again, coming home. What is home for me? I've moved a bunch of times. I'm trying to figure out what that is. And home is like a feeling, right? There was a question somebody asked was like, how many times have you ever silenced yourself so you don't make somebody else uncomfortable? Or how many times have you done, you don't say how you're actually feeling because you don't think it's socially accepted or it's not the right thing. And the truth is, I've had people say, oh my God, Melissa, you always go so deep. You always want to talk about like how people feel, or you want to talk about everyone's feelings, or like you want to assess the situation. Like just keep it superficial or keep it light. And I'm like, I can't. I don't know how
Yeah.
to, right? Like, and I don't know if I want to live like that's not who I am anymore, right? Like, so it's not that everybody's broken, but there is a way to do whatever you're doing and just do it on a little bit deeper of a level, go a little bit more. And I got to bring up Aaron Rodgers for a second because Aaron Rodgers is a really known quarterback who's drank ayahuasca, openly talks about it, has a documentary on Netflix. And one of the questions somebody said was like, were you scared to go sit with plant medicine? Like, what if it was, going to do something to you, or you were going to find out that you were living the wrong life? And he said, yeah, of course I was scared. He goes, I was scared they were going to tell me that maybe I wasn't doing. He goes, but when I got there and I drank, he goes, I realized I love football. It's what I do. He goes, I went and turned around and then MVP for the next 3 years. I just became a better version of myself. Like you get to know yourself better. You start working at it. And I use like he's not perfect. He's had lots of issues. He's all over. It's not great. He's a human. He's going through a process. And I just feel like, when you are able to take some time to sit with yourself and self-love, get to know you better, work through any suppressed feelings just so you can be the best version of yourself, best mother, best friend, best wife, best you, best dentist, all those things you only support, mankind, the human good. And that's all we can do is just work on ourselves and try to support each other and try not to judge. I think that's another thing. I think we all judge really, really hard. I think people tend to want to judge a lot. Well, with that being said, as you said, I know I asked that big question of like, where do you see your journey and all that coming? But moving forward into this, do you feel as though these trends are getting more accepted? Do you feel like these conversations are a little bit easier to have? Have you seen improvement?
Yeah, the internet, I mean, and also Myo's everywhere right now. I feel like it's at every CE course. Everybody's talking about myofunctional therapy. Weirdly, I think it seems like that. But then dentists, the regular platform of dentists, they might go to an airway course, but nobody feels right now that I know around my area that they can easily implement screenings or what to do. So that is the next phase of
Of
what
everything?
we're doing. I just got our little breathing practice table at the South Carolina Dental Association meeting, and I'm gonna stick Kayla up there. And even if we go through helping providers and hygiene, the whole team look at Ferris 6 screening forms and start to ask the questions and just think, you know, I do think that it is become, I say that I think it's becoming easier to talk about, but I, I mean, we're still developing relationships with ENTs and trying to figure out how we all can work together because the dentist can't be hearing all this stuff about resting tongue posture and how that affects stuff and have everybody can't be on really separate pages about how to approach patients and how to triage them. And so I guess, are you finding in your career as you're doing this that this is just exploding organically from you? Is it mostly patient driven from patient education things on their own, or is it coming from top down? And what about multidisciplinarily?
Yeah, I absolutely think that your perception is reality for a lot of people. But if I look back and I see where we were when we first started to now, I think we are definitely on a trajectory of more acceptance. I think it takes 10 years to really mess things up. And I think it takes 30 years to course correct. And I think we're about halfway through. I think we're somewhere between like year, 13 and 15, somewhere in there of where things are are opening, and I think the conversations are being had. I actually look at where we are in the world and, both of us being here in the US. I mean, I have a fair amount of international. I just did a course in London and I got a conversation, people had big questions about what's going on here. And I said, listen, whether you like it or not, at least we're having conversations about our food quality, about red dyes. There's some pushback. And because of that, I think the only way to move forward is to recognize the elephants in the room. And somebody said, well, things are so divided in the US. I said, you know what? They were probably like that forever, but nobody was talking about it because nobody was polar, like nobody was just saying the things that nobody wanted to say. And I think you have to get really uncomfortable to make big change. And I think that's where we're at. And I'm always really excited and remind myself people like you. I mean, every year if I get nervous, like, oh my God, what if no dentist wants to embark on this crazy journey? What would I do next? But every year there's always somebody else who wants to do it, that wants to roll up their sleeves. And I learn from it. And I feel as though we're in a really great opportunity with some really great companies. I think what Munchie did over the last 2 years, trying to come up with more digestible programs and tools to help dentists where they're at. I think big stuff. I think they're coming out with a Munchie Moves program for parents, which is something direct. I think that's a really great thing. I get a lot of questions about tooth pillow, and I always say, like, I'm against capitalism. I think companies need to you need to make money and you need to work because we have a really big problem and there's a lot of people that need access to help and care. And so the more people talking and educating, it only helps the mission as a whole. So I think we're seeing a movement that I think Spot Pal and Sport Pal is a company out of these speech therapists in Long Island. I think what they're doing in the sports level of bringing in these really accessible appliances they're about to launch that every athlete that a dentist recommends Spot Pal for will get included a myo exam and 2 sessions based off of that athlete. They're about to launch that. And that's going to be for like $199. I think the dentist can get it for, $99. They could sell it to the patient, and it's a custom mouth guard. The kid, you can have the athlete's logo in it. I mean, like high-end stuff. I think that's incredible. Like, I think there's missions of things that are happening that I'm really excited about. And I think that's going to allow us to keep moving forward. So I think if yourself and different practices, I'll tell you, you want to know an area I think that's about to blow up is South Florida. I think there's a lot of dentists that are stirring and moving. And I think because of their population growth, I've just been inundated. I had a doctor in Fort Lauderdale call, say she's got some connections with the NFL and she wants to get these myo appliances in somebody's kid's mouth because they want to launch and see if they can get some type of tongue space function for their camps and their athletes. I think this is some really exciting conversations that maybe the one area, tell me what your thoughts on this. I'd like to steer people. I think we've been focusing on the sick, right? Like, does your kid not sleep well? Do they bedwet? Do they look tired, right? There's a lot of kids that are functioning pretty well in this moderate area that are in extreme, right? But they have a grade 3 tongue tie, they're clenching a little bit, they're grinding, but they're playing sports. And I think if we could say, hey, listen, we can give your kid the oxygen advantage, like from Patrick McEwen. They got to wear a mouth guard anyway. So put them in something that moves their jaw forward or has a tongue positioner. So they're doing a little myo on the soccer field or on the football field. I think there's a real opportunity. Biohacking's a huge thing. People spend billions of dollars in health and wellness and support. I think we need to shift our focus. Me and Joanna are going away, I'm going to tell her a lot. I think the adult side, we got to focus on biohacking a little bit more and, dip into that healthy area. Cause I think adults want to know that. Maybe not focus on what's wrong with them. You almost have to let them figure it out on their own, but you start with the little low hanging fruit. So that's what excites me right now is I feel like there's a lot of cool new opportunities coming down the pipeline.
I think so too. And even for the dentists that once they start screening, like what you're talking about, Munchie having products, those replenish straws
Well,
have
yeah,
have
can't,
been
yeah,
great.
burners out. Mhm.
I think there's going to be like some people can have a take home product on their own, that you send to people and you're like, hey, I can see that this is going on. Some people, there's a place for personal trainers and not everybody can
Yeah, of course.
needs or, there's a place for all of it. But I think it's gonna, hopefully it becomes something that's just a talk that I think the next 5 years are going to make a big difference. As part of our meeting for our Greater Columbia Dental Association, there was the head of orthodontics at MUSC, and he showed like 6 cases, and every single one, even an adult, was a palate expansion case. And so just it's
You know,
bleeding through everywhere.
I'll also say, if you guys don't know about, and Joanna, we'll have to get you connected to them, but the Airway Revolution, they're launching a movie that they put a ton of money in. It's like directed by a high end. They're doing some amazing nonprofit stuff. They're doing stuff in New York City school districts, and I think they're also going to make a pretty big. I'm just looking up here. It's like the Airway Sydney, and they have a great story. It's a father who's a dentist, and he opens up about his daughter's surgery, her daughter's airway, her mental health, and then ends up down with the doctor in Houston, his podcast is blown up. I can't think of his name right now, but they did this whole movie with Mike Muse in it, Zoggy's in it, and they're going to launch it, and they're going to have like release parties. And I think every general dentist should get behind that movement. I think it's going to really help really stir things up. So, I think there's a lot of people that maybe we don't all know about that are doing some really great stuff. And so I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see some big, big things changing. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, let me ask you, I like to kind of leave thing on a little bit of a personal kind of note is, what kind of legacy do you want to leave?
I'm going to say thank you because I think right now, as much of a disruptor as this is to my life, looking at patient testimonials right now for the ways that myo or expansion, all of the things that have to do with airway have changed people's lives. Right now, it doesn't matter if it was just a couple people. There's a lot of people in my area that you could go to and get beautiful dental work. But right now, those people who let us go down that journey and whose mom is crying because their kid is still bedwetting and will say, you know, if I had realized that going through this was the root cause of so many of our issues, I mean, I don't know if I need a legacy other than somebody, thinking back and saying, I went to somebody and she took the time and she did her best job, and through it I'm a healthier person, I'm a happier person, I feel better, me or my children, than I would have been able to go with somebody else. And I mean, that's as a healthcare provider, and the big thing is do no harm, right? Isn't that our first Hippocratic oath? And if we're not looking at root cause analysis and we're doing dental work after dental work or crowning things and not looking at root cause, are we actually not being neglectful? Because at first we're really over treating or not treating the right thing. So my legacy, I hope, is that somebody looks at me and says, "Hey, she took the time to really do what she felt ethically the best thing for the best interest of her patient every single time." And
That's
that's
beautiful. And then we end the show on this one question that we leave for everybody. And we just say, so when you think of mind your mouth, what does it mean to you? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think mind your mouth?
huh. Well, on this podcast, it means say whatever the heck goes into your brain the first time it goes there.
I love it. That's exactly what it's meant to be. I love that. Well, Joanna, I can talk to you for days and hours like always, but I can't thank you enough. And I would love to have you back on again, but I'm going to put it in the show notes. How can people find you? How can they refer you patients? If a doctor just wants to talk to you and talk about your journey a little bit, how can they find you?
Oh, well, that's my name right there. And you can look it under like dentist. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina, but our breathecolumbiasc.com right now, the email's now forwarding to us. It's supposed to be up our website by August 1st is my thing. But our practices are Forest Drive Dental Care in Columbia, South Carolina, and Columbia Children's Dentistry.
And
And
I've been telling people, if you are even in the Charlotte area, if you're anyone, it is worth the drive. Go down. If you have a child or you're an adult patient struggling with airway issues, go see Joanna. Well, girl,
Oh,
thank
you're
you
kind.
so much. I cannot wait for everybody to see this, and I'll talk to you soon.